My presentation was on understanding the answer choices. So basically, I wanted to know why students miss multiple choice questions and what can I do to help. So I teach biology, and that's basically all ninth graders. And then I did it for all of my biology classes, both on level and pre-AP. So starting in December, we had the benchmark and the entire school did the benchmark, which was wonderful. So then I had the entire school, all the other biology teachers also do the metacognitive data tracker with me. And based on those results, I was going to use those results and kind of figure out what area should I focus on for why students miss the question. So in the spring, we did not complete the benchmark. So even though I had lots of participation in December, I had way less participation in the spring. Those are basically only my students. So here are my results from the metacognitive data tracker. So I had 308 students completed. That's 1,695 missed questions total. And overwhelmingly, over 50% said that it was the answer choices that they struggled with, which I guess now after listening to all of y'all's presentations, it seems like a lot of them were focusing on the question instead. So a little bit different, but I use this data. And so I was gonna focus on how can I help students looking at those answer choices, selecting the correct answer choice. But I also asked students, big picture, reflect on the test that you took. What do you think is the hardest part of the test? And most of them said understanding the question. So that's a little bit different because even though they had already told me that, they really struggled with understanding the answer choices, they in their heads still believed that it was the question. So that's just a difference that I thought was interesting. So what did I do? I, in my class, used something slightly different than crumbs. I did it a question dissection. And what was different is that in my class, we don't build an answer. So this step of building the answer would have been new. So I decided to implement that in my class and focus on building an answer to help students select the correct answer for the multiple choice. So we did practice questions, and I tried to use, when possible, tried to use previous STAR questions as a practice question. So I did this with Pear Deck, which was great because I could actually hide the questions and have students build their answer. And then on the next slide, they could pick their answer. So this prevents them from seeing the correct answer. So which statement correctly identifies a difference in the structure of proteins and polysaccharides? This is a nice question because they can tell me differences, like what do they know? And then from that, we could select the correct answer. So after we did this practice in class, I gave them a 4-question test. And so these are the results of that test. After they took the test, I had them reflect again. Why did you miss these questions? So you can see right away, we went from 53% of the students selecting didn't understand the answer choices. That was from the benchmark data. Now we're down to 32% are saying I didn't understand the answer choices. So that was a really big jump, but I wanted to keep going. So the next thing that I had students do was kind of focus on that step of select the correct answer. So this is a previous STAR question that we used. So the question at the very bottom, which of the following best describes how enzymes speed up a chemical reaction? What I had students do was build their answer and then focus on like synonyms. So some of them would get confused like by this word decreasing. So we would, come up with our answer and then look at other words that we could use that would still be a correct answer. So actually having them list synonyms for words so they could find those synonyms in their answer choices and understand that that's still a correct answer, even though I said lower and the question said decrease. So same thing. So this is the result of the enzyme test. So once again, we did a 4-question test after we practiced this skill. So we went from, now we're down to 23% are still having trouble with those answer choices. So we did one more thing, one more practice. So for this one, this was definitely the most helpful thing out of everything that I did, and I will definitely do this again next year. I didn't actually use practice questions because honestly, I was having trouble finding practice questions at some points and there's getting overlay. So I would just give students a sentence and underline words and have them rewrite the sentence, but changing the underlying words. So really pushing that, how much you know, how do they understand this vocabulary and how can they apply the vocabulary in this statement? So I gave the students the sentence, the order of the DNA bases determines the protein, and then, you know, all sorts of different answers. So one student would say like the sequence of the nucleotides determines the amino acids, or we could change, you know, protein amino acid traits. Those would all be correct. So there's all these different variations, and having them really focus on, you know, this is still a correct answer. Was incredibly helpful. So this was the final test that we did. So we started with 53% of students were having trouble with the answer choices. We ended with 8.3%. I would say I thought that the final test was the easiest test, just because I was having trouble finding questions that were really good by this point, but I still think that it's a significant decrease. You can also see clearly at this point that understanding the question is now the biggest part that students are having trouble with. So that is definitely where I would go from here. So I think that we did a really good job coming up with skills for understanding the answer choices, but definitely need to look at understanding the question for the next part of the research. And that is it. Thank you.